Hello, lovelies. Today I turned 33, and I was reflecting on my life and how different I am now versus when I was 18. There's been a lot of change in that time in between, and I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about that today and tell you my thoughts on escaping the Tradwife pipeline. Now, if you haven't heard the term Tradwife before, it is defined by Wikipedia as a woman who believes in and practices traditional gender roles and marriages. Some may choose to take a homemaking role within their marriage, and others leave their careers to focus on meeting their family's needs in the home. For context, I am currently a stay-at-home mom, so some may view my life as being a Tradwife, but I can assure you it is not as simple as just staying at home with your kids. There's a whole ideology behind it that can be very toxic and damaging. I'm not going to get into all of those aspects in this video, but there are plenty of videos out there that explain it very well if you're interested. The first thing I want to talk about today is emotional growth. This is one aspect that I have grown in the most, I feel like. When I was younger, I don't think I even really knew what boundaries were, not really. I thought that setting what I now know to be boundaries would be selfish. I was raised in a culture that thrived on the unacknowledged sacrifice and exploitation of women and children. Boundaries would have been counterproductive. I was basically taught, not necessarily from outright direction, but just by growing up in that space, that my needs were not as important as the needs of others. That I was created to make babies, make a house a home, and keep my husband happy. This was what God wanted me to do with my life. It was my sole purpose for being on this earth. This shaped and molded me into a people pleaser who couldn't say no, and led me into toxic, harmful relationships with men who took advantage of my pliability and my ignorance. Over the last decade, I've been slowly unlearning this concept. It's been hard. It's very difficult for me to stand up for myself. I have intense anxiety, and setting boundaries does not come easy. But I'm so incredibly grateful to have the privilege I do to heal, that I have access to therapy and a good support system. Not everyone is so lucky, so I want to acknowledge that. Through all of this, I have learned that boundaries are important if you want strong, healthy relationships. I learned my own worth. That my worth is not bound up in my ability to have children or stay at home with them. That my purpose isn't just to have children and take care of my husband, who is a grown man who doesn't need a woman to mother him. Yes, having children and being married is such a huge part of my life, especially in this season of my life where my children are still very young, but it isn't my sole purpose. Which brings me to my second point of growth: perspective shifts. My kids will grow up relatively soon, and if raising them is my purpose, would my purpose be complete when they're grown? My oldest is already turning 10 in a matter of days, and that is still hard to wrap my brain around. I'll be 48 when my youngest turns 18, and while I do have a heart condition, that's still relatively young, and I plan to stick around a lot longer than that. Again, if raising kids is my sole purpose, what am I supposed to do when they're all off to college? I know my adult children will still need me, and I plan to support them in whatever way they need as they navigate life as adults, but it will be a lot different than it is now. I've come to realize that purpose in life is not necessarily one thing. Maybe my purpose is just life. To grow, to learn. My children and my husband play a big part of my purpose, but they are not the only things in my life. They're my biggest blessings for sure, but I also have passions and dreams I would like to pursue. My writing, my art, creating things. I want to be as educated as I can be, not just speaking of traditional college education, but by reading books and experiencing things as well, listening to older people around me about their experiences and learning about what they have learned in their lives. I've changed my perspective on so many things these last few years. If you told 18-year-old me some of the things I believe now, I would never believe you. And yet, looking back, I can see the seeds of these perspectives even back then. I have always had a heart for people and a strong sense of justice and anger when I see it violated. I was constantly at war with my emotions and what I was being taught. Being raised in an ultra-conservative Christian nationalist environment brought up a lot of conflict inside of me. I bought it all for a long time because I was afraid. Fear rules in that world, which is ironic because we're also taught to place our trust in God and not have any fear or worry for the future. Before 2020, I was anti-vax. I wasn't against other people getting them if they needed them, but I was terrified of getting them myself or my kids getting vaccinated, which is kind of funny looking back because I was vaccinated as a small child because my dad was in the military and I was fine. But I was also, far right. I don't think I really considered myself Republican, but I aligned mostly with Republican politics. I was anti-choice, and I planned to homeschool my kids until they were graduated. 2020 was a big turning point for me. I felt massively convicted that getting the COVID vaccine was a way for me to show my neighbors love, and so I did it. It was one of the first times really in my life that I really felt like I was being drawn to do something. And it was very powerful. And ever since then, I have been getting regular shots, and my kids are getting vaxxed as well. So I have definitely changed a lot over these years. I'm also no longer homeschooling. I know I've talked about it a little bit before, but I'm no longer homeschooling my oldest. And I plan to attend college for the first time in the fall to become an art teacher. So my life looks so different now than I had planned. But when I look back, I see all of the seeds of where these perspectives sprouted from. And the person I was kind of meant to be this whole time, and I'm only just now blossoming into that. And it's honestly, I feel very thankful for it, because I have this peace over everything now. And I just am so thankful that I have this perspective now and have the ability to explore all these things and heal and grow. And I'm honestly just really thankful for the ability to age too, because I have been worried about my heart condition for a while now. And this is one of the best times to be alive with this condition because there's been so many leaps in medical research and everything regarding heart conditions. And so I have a very good outcome, And I'm just very thankful. And I personally really enjoy getting older because I feel like each year that passes, I have learned something new, and I've gained more perspective on something else. I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to do that. I'd like to share a bit of a perspective shift that happened to me just recently. I am still a Christian. I've done a lot of deconstruction, but I still believe in God and attend church regularly with my family. My husband and I are part of a small group right now going through a book called A Different Way by Christopher Hall. One of the points we were talking about was how Jesus brought the kingdom of God to earth, and it wasn't what the disciples had expected of the Messiah. This section was talking about living in God's kingdom in our lives, and how eventually, as we develop in our Christian walk, our will should sort of mesh with God's will for our lives. So we're living in a combined, we're living in God's kingdom, really, instead of like our own kingdom. I have struggled with this concept for a long time, every time I've heard it preached, mainly because of what I was taught I was supposed to be and what God's will for my life was. So again, I am sitting there feeling selfish for wanting to pursue something outside of my home. I was getting frustrated about it because I've been planning all these things and, trying to figure out What do I want to do after I become an art teacher? Because I really only plan to do that while my kids are in school, and so where do I want to go after that, you know? And so I'm sitting there feeling frustrated. I was ready to ask our study leader about it because I was honestly kind of fed up with feeling that way. So I was waiting for a break in the conversation to do so when it hit me. It was like everything clicked into place for the first time. A weight was lifted off my shoulders and I could see everything clearly. We were reading through the book, and it said, Jesus, as Israel's Messiah, is waging war against key characteristics of this present evil age. Sin, sickness, the demonic, evil people triumphing, injustice, the continuing exile of Israel, and death. As the promised Messiah, Jesus must confront each of these features of evil, and he does. This is where everything snapped into place for me. You see, I've been thinking about what I want to do after I become an art teacher, and my kids are in high school or off to college. And these last few years, I've found myself drawn to social work. Being able to help trauma victims or children in the foster care system, something along those lines. Maybe I'll become an art therapist, or a regular therapist, who knows. But I have realized through talking to a few different people and taking that training course that I took last summer that I have a heart for social work, and it's something I just feel drawn to. So reading those words and seeing how all those things that Jesus actively confronted during his time on earth are things that have always bothered me and I've wanted to do something about was such a light bulb moment. It was like God was telling me, see, this is where I want you. You're exactly on the path that I want you on. And I could see all the places in my life where I had had no clue what was happening, but God was gently nudging me along and bringing the right people into my life to encourage me. I realize this might sound kind of crazy to somebody who isn't a Christian or wasn't raised in a Christian setting, but it was a really wonderful experience, and it's left me with so much peace, and I'm just very thankful for it. I wish the emphasis on the beginning of my life hadn't been so Tradwife oriented. I know there are women out there bemoaning the fact that they weren't raised to be a homemaker and instead have degrees, but honestly, having a degree and a career gives you a good safety net. Women who have college degrees and careers are less likely to be abused. They also struggle less if they need to leave an abusive spouse because they can support themselves and their kids better. I'm not saying it totally fixes everything, just that by encouraging your daughters to get an education and have a career, you are helping set them up for a better future. If you want to stay home with your kids, that's fantastic. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I do it too. Just that it's a good idea to have something to fall back on in case something tragic happens. And it doesn't have to be something like abuse or infidelity. Your spouse could have an accident and no longer be able to provide for you and your kids. So if you're a young person and are considering what you want out of life, my advice would be to get an education and a career now before you get married and have kids. It's a wonderful thing to be a mother. But there are lots of hard days too, and being a stay-at-home mom can be fairly isolating. So make sure you are really prepared. Some women thrive in it, and others not so much. In conclusion, I guess the biggest thing that I've learned in my life and my experience of escaping this whole Tradwife pipeline is to give yourself options. Life is unpredictable, and having the ability to support yourself, whether financially, emotionally, or intellectually, gives you the freedom to make choices that align with your well-being rather than out of necessity or fear. Growth is an ongoing process, and your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It's okay to change your mind, to evolve, and to embrace new perspective as you gain more experience. At 33, I can say with confidence that I am still growing, still learning, and still figuring things out. But I no longer feel trapped by an ideology that tried to define my worth for me. Instead, I'm defining it for myself, with faith, purpose, and a deep appreciation for the journey. Thanks for being here with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How have your perspectives changed over the years? Have you heard of this whole Tradwife movement? What are your thoughts on it, I guess? Please consider liking this video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment, share, do all the things that help my channel grow. It really helps me out and it costs nothing. So if you would like to support my channel in the early baby days, then I would be very grateful. I know the topic was kind of unrelated to this painting, but I did really enjoy making this painting. I would love to do some more illustration type paintings, and I've always loved Beatrix Potter and like Wind in the Willows and stories like that, so I love doing these little animals, and I would love to do some more paintings like this in the future. So stay tuned for all of that. I'm not sure exactly what my next painting will be, but I will definitely be filming it. So thank you so much for being here. And as always, stay lovely.